Yo, what's going on, guys? GZTV back with another video. And in this one, we are talking about the third overall episode that came out on Sunday of The Last of Us, one of the best video game franchises of all time. I haven't even played it, but I've heard so much praise for it. So, yeah, definitely watching the show is it's gonna make it interesting having not played the game. More interesting than if I just played the game, but. Yeah, episode 3 of The Last of Us begins 10 miles west of Boston. Ellie and Joel are closing in on their target while Joel gives Ellie her jacket. She still hasn't forgiven her for what happened to Tess. Ellie calls him out and tells Joel not to blame her for something that isn't her fault. She never asked to be taken out of the city. She was like, hey, you guys are the ones that wanted to do this. The pair continue to walk on, heading along a 5-mile hike to Bill and Frank's place, who, Cumberland Farms is their stopgap, though, a rundown and abandoned gas station, and we'll learn a little bit more about Bill and Frank and their love story. Ellie finds an arcade machine from Mortal Kombat 2 and trades some jokes with Joel, all the while delivering pretty authentic dialogue for the characters from the game. So yeah, apparently this is very accurate to the game, which is cool, which is always great. Ellie wanders off alone and finds a hatch leading down to the basement. By the way, this is a spoiler review, so if you haven't played the game, if you haven't watched the show, do not watch this review. She decides to explore alone naturally, where she uncovers one of the infected. Obviously, she's still a kid, so she kind of has that curiosity. This time, though, they're wedged into the wall with fungi growing up the side of their head. Ellie hits the killer blow and puts the turned creature out of its misery. And that's kind of like the same mindset that people in The Walking Dead have, put it out of its misery type. With little ammo left, Joel decides to leave his shotgun behind before pressing on. As they do, Ellie riffs on the government, blaming them for being unable to contain a pandemic while trying to understand how all of this began. Again, she's a little kid. She's not a little kid, she's a kid, she's a teenager, she's innocent, she's not really sure what's going on yet. According to Joel, the cordyceps mutated, got into the food supply worldwide, and around the same time on a Thursday, people bought the food and then got sick, eventually leading to the infected, who began biting everyone else who wasn't. It took 3 days for the infection to spread completely. That was Infection Day, obviously. That was showcased in the first episode of the series. But, man, I can't wait till we start talking about Bill and, what's the other dude's name? How am I forgetting what his name is? Frank. Bill and Frank's story. There are numerous skeletal remains in the woods, too, which Joel explains are ordinary people who couldn't find a home in the QZ quarantine zone. So the soldiers took them outside and decided to gun them down. Yeah, it's kind of fucked up, but, yeah. It's a grim story and something that sees us cut back to September 30th, 2003 to see play out. Bill happens to be watching from his house as soldiers round everyone up and prepare to head out. So he has his own place. Yeah. Bill hides in the basement and manages to avoid detection despite the mandatory evacuation notice. So, at this time, when the infection was spreading, people were forced to, get out of their houses in case they were infected and could be a danger to everyone else. So everyone was just forced to get out of their house and find a QZ or else they're going to die. Bill heads outside wearing a gas mask and sporting his gun, which is pretty stupid since we know there are no spores in this show. Before seemingly realizing this himself and learning that he's well and truly alone. Like a true survivor, Bill grabs as much gear as possible, including several drums of petrol, supplies at the Home Depot, and a whole bunch of alcohol. So this guy's gearing up, he's going out, he's hunting, gathering, to prepare to literally quarantine in his house because, again, they were forced to evacuate. So if he's just running out in the wild, and he doesn't want to be controlled by people, he doesn't want to be in a quarantine zone. With his generator outside, Bill has enough to keep going with a fence put around the perimeter of the town. Bill is eating well too, cutting up his own meat, watching the infected take themselves out through his various traps, and managing to survive for a good 4 years alone. That is until a fateful day where one of the holes is triggered and Bill finds a guy named Frank outside. He's a homeless guy. He has nowhere to go. He's out in the wild. He's obviously at risk to die. And obviously Frank is automatically Well, obviously Bill is like, just go find the nearest QZ. Now, Frank was originally in a group of 10 trying to make it to Boston, but now it's only Frank left. He's also completely unarmed, too. He doesn't have anything on his name right now. Bill decides to let the guy out, although he keeps an eye on him. He checks for infection, too, and Frank is in the clear. He's like, okay, you're good. Bill allows Frank into his home with a change of clothes and a promise of food. As the pair sit down to eat together, Frank is shocked at the hearty meal and the perfect glass of wine to go with it. You know, you're honestly surprised that people have these luxuries still, given there's this fat pandemic going on. Also, Frank starts messing about with the antique piano in the living room and begins playing. Bill begins playing thereafter a heartfelt, grief-stricken song about a guy he lost. And this is going to be some foreshadowing, because it's going to happen again. This is one of the most tragic love stories. This is the start of one of the most tragic love stories, and that's kind of what the picture is here, them playing the piano. Frank understands his pain, and the pair begin kissing. I didn't know, Bill was a... the fuck? I didn't know Bill was a homosexual character. So obviously when this all happened, I was kind of surprised, but I was like, okay, I mean, you gotta have some diversity in a show, obviously. Things are going great, especially when they get into bed, but then we fast forward to 3 years later. Frank and Bill end up in an argument as the former wants to paint the house, fix up some of the shops, and get gas for the lawnmower. Well, Frank is... what the fuck? Ew. What the hell? That's fucking gross. Frank wants to invite more people into the community and allow them to visit, but Bill wants to be secluded. He wants only these two, them two as a relationship, to have these benefits. Frank, though, has been talking to friends on the radio, friends that happen to be Tess and Joel, whom they decide to work with. Those are the only guys that he will accept. Ew! Bro, there's a ladybug and a stink bug out right on my windowsill out there. That is nasty. Joe and Bill end up talking outside, with the former pointing out that there are things in the QZ he could get him. Is he eating him? Specifically geared to help with the perimeter fence, which Joel deduces only has about a year left at best. They also agree to use music on the radio as a code, which is Frank's idea. Before they part ways, Joel warns that raiders could come and attack at night, and they need to be ready in case that happens. Well, this deal stays in place for a solid 3 years as we cut forward to 2013. Frank is traded a gun with Joel and Tess for seeds so they can grow strawberries, and this unfortunately happens to be the calm before the storm as raiders showed up at the perimeter just as predicted at that night. And, well, I mean, it leads to a lot of bad things, but, you know, Bill manages to hold them off, but he ends up shot in the process, but we're sure he's fine. Thankfully, they survive as we jump forward once more another 10 years as Bill and Frank both grow old together, so their relationship is prospering. They've had a long life. Frank is not doing so well, though, and decides that this is going to be his last day. With no doctor, no cure, Frank wants to go out on his own terms with a great final day planned, including getting married and falling asleep in Bill's arms after taking a whole stack of pills. And it turns out they both plan on doing this. It's very sad, but at the same time, it's very fulfilling. Like, they get their end together. Back in the present, Joel and Ellie arrive at Bill's town. It's abandoned. They make it into Bill's house, but between the rotting food on the table and the note on the living room table from Bill, the inevitable has happened. He's killed himself. A lot of people have killed themselves probably during this whole thing, but, you know, Bill had his reasons. Frank was going out on health issues, and yeah. Bill also leaves behind a key for his car too, which he takes while Ellie reads out the letter. Within this note, Bill admits that he hated the world until one person came along that changed his mind and made things worth saving, and that was Frank, obviously. Frank was like his salvation, which is very interesting. Yeah. He also gets the bunker code and anything else they may want to take too. That's why men like you and me are here. We have a job to do, and God help any motherfuckers who stand in our way. It's a really nice way to contextualize Joel and Bill's similarities before we see Joel's ticket out of there, and for him to meet back up with his brother. which is what he's been trying to do for a while, but obviously this was kind of like his side mission to, find some closure, see what Bill and Frank ended up, what their fate was. He's going for Wyoming, and as Tommy used to be a firefly, he may know where to take Ellie. In the bunker, the pair grab as many supplies as possible. Ellie also gets changed into her familiar gear from the games. This time, though, Ellie finds a handgun and stashes it in her bag, which Joel doesn't see. They play some music as they head out, the same song that Frank originally sang when he first arrived in town. Very interesting full circle moment there. Let's see here. The Last of Us returns with a really solid episode, a beautiful love letter to Bill's past, and a great backstory to flesh the world out to kind of make you learn about Bill, although he's not really obviously he's not going to be a big part of the show. He is dead, but to kind of learn about that character was a good thing, and I think that was almost necessary for the show to do. In fact, the serial changes here actually work much better for the story being told as opposed to the game, which leans much more into the action and thematic weight of showing these different individuals and how they've survived the infection. Nick Offerman puts in a fantastic performance as Bill, with solid acting throughout, and a really heartfelt scene with him learning about Frank's final day. The entire gut-wrenching reveal, not to mention the final meal, hits on a deep level and really helps elevate his character. On that same note, Bella Ramsey is much improved in her role as Ellie here, with the right balance between snarky teenager and sympathetic supporting lead. At the same time, though, these changes do rob us of one of the best parts of the game, Ellie and Bill's banter. We didn't get that, apparently. This is where Ellie really comes into her own. It's a shame that the same parts don't materialize, especially with the infamous magazine pages. For those unaware, in the game, Bill is still alive and doesn't commit suicide. Instead, he's extremely paranoid, and although he helps Joel and Ellie, the pair find Frank's body hanging, and a note reveals that he absolutely hates Bill's guts. So, kind of a change of pace there, but that's good, because the people in the game get a twist, and yeah. The more romantic ending for the show, though, fits with the world we've been introduced to. The chapters ahead could well dial up the action a notch, especially as the attention turns to Philadelphia, which is a personal favorite part of the game, especially meeting Henry and Sam. So it's something we look forward to. Although it's incomparable to the far superior game, The Last of Us isn't a bad adaptation at all. So yeah, obviously this review is a little shorter than the last ones, but leave a like, comment, subscribe. Hopefully you guys have a good rest of your day. Hopefully if you're playing the game, you enjoy my reviews. Hopefully if you don't play the game and you're watching the show for the first time and you're watching it along with me, you've had a good time. I think this is a pretty damn good show. The twist from the game is obviously great. Obviously, I wasn't aware of that, but I had my notes down, and